Good morning, Mumbai. Hi, my name is Prakash, and along with my wife Joyce, we serve the Kolkata church. We have been married for the last 26 and a half years. We have 3 kids. Our eldest son is 24, our middle son is 20, and our youngest daughter is 18 years old. I was born and brought up in Mumbai, also known as Bombay. I studied there. I did my graduation there. I became a disciple in Mumbai in 1988 during my final year BCom. I left Mumbai 31 years ago in 1989 as a 1-year-old Christian to be a part of the Delhi mission team. Now, David and Monica were part of that team as well. In fact, we were all part of the same Bible Talk, Lullaby Park Bible Talk in Andheri. Since then, God has taken me to places that I could have never imagined. Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Dhaka, back to Delhi, and then Kolkata. Christian life is an adventure. And when you are on an adventure, you have your ups and downs. It's exciting. Things are not boring. And God has always been faithful to me through the last 31 years of my Christian life. And one of the things that, we notice over here is many times we start our Christian life very excited, very faithful. Our faith is all-time high. We believe that we can conquer the world for Christ. But somewhere down the line, we start getting distracted. We start getting attracted to the things of the world. We start having desires of this world, which gets us off our Christian path. Though outwardly we might go through the motion of being a Christian, our heart is getting attached to the things of this world. And that is what we will be studying today in the book of Luke chapter 12. The parable of the rich fool. Let's turn our Bible to Luke chapter 12, verse 31 onwards. Verse 13 onwards. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Now, what was the issue over here that Jesus was addressing? This was the issue of greed. It looks like a father, the head of the family, had died. And after the funeral, the inheritance is normally divided among all the children. And under the normal circumstances, the eldest son becomes the head of the family. It looks like in this situation, the eldest son is refusing to give his inheritance to his siblings. Basically, greed has taken over this son that he doesn't want to part with the inheritance. Now, is this something new? No, we read about this all the time in the news and even in India today. We see children throwing their parents out of their house to get the inheritance. Or they kill their parents. We have siblings kill each other for inheritance. Greed is dangerous. Now, why is greed dangerous? Because greed is an intense desire to acquire something. And to get that, because the desire is so intense that we are willing to do anything. We're willing to compromise. We are willing to kill, cheat, lie, to get what we desire. And we don't even realize it because we become slave to it. But the danger of greed is it never satisfies us. We get something and then we look for something new. In verse 15, Jesus says, "Then he said to them, 'Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions.'" Jesus is warning us to be alert against all kinds of greed. We all struggle with greed. Our struggles are different. Some of us, we are greedy for food maybe. For some it could be gadgets, the latest gadgets, new car, owning a house. And the problem is that we are never satisfied. We get that latest gadget, then we are looking for something new. We get that car, then we are looking for a bigger car, a newer car, a luxurious car. We get our own home and then we are looking for a bigger home and a nicer home, a luxurious home. What is the problem with greed? We are never satisfied. We are looking for always something new after we get it. And that is what Jesus is warning us, that life is not about collecting possessions. It is not about the one who has the most toys wins. That is the warning of Jesus. Let me ask you a question. Is that a struggle for us today? What am I greedy about? What is the intense desire that I have that is consuming me? It is okay to say, if I have this, I'll be happy, but is it something that is consuming you? And if we are not careful, that will consume us. That will make us compromise and do things that we might regret later on. Now let's look at the rich fool over here as it tells the parable in verse 16. Jesus says, he told them this parable. The ground of a rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Now the first delusion this rich man had was that he was in control. I am in control. That was the delusion he had. Now if you notice, it was the ground that yielded an abundant harvest. It wasn't so much the rich man's hard work or talent that brought him the harvest. It was the ground. Maybe he inherited the ground, the land from his father. Maybe he bought that land from somebody. But no matter what the situation was, it was the land that was rich and fertile, and that's the reason why it produced incredible harvest. It is so easy for us to get deceived into thinking that, the things that I've achieved is because of my hard work, my talent, my gifts, forgetting that it is God who gives us the ability to produce wealth. It is God who gives us the opportunity for all the success that we have achieved. This is something that God was warning the Israelites when they left Egypt as slaves and entered into the promised land, or they were traveling into the promised land. God was reminding them not to forget. In fact, let's turn our Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 11 to 18. And let us see what God had to warn the Israelites, that is even applies to you and me today. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 11 onwards, God says, be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe His commands, His laws and His decrees that I'm giving you this day. The biggest problem with mankind is loss of memory. We forget all the good that God has done in our lives. And that is the warning that God is giving the Israelites today, at that point of time, is not to forget Him. Why is it so important not to forget? Because when we forget God, we fail to observe His commands, His laws and His decrees. When we forget God, we forget His words. When we forget God, we forget to hold on to His word. We don't think that it is that following God and following His command and holding His laws and decrees is that important. We drift away from God, and that's the danger of forgetting what God has done in our lives. In verse 12, otherwise when you eat and are satisfied, it talks about having food, enough food to eat, good food to eat. And when you build fine houses and settle down, it talks about having your own home, a nice home, a place of refuge, a place where you settle down with your family. When your herds and flocks grow large, it talks about you having a good career, a successful career, where you're secured at your workplace, and your silver and gold increases, and all you have is multiplied. It talks about your wealth. It talks about your savings that you have. How do we behave when we have food to eat, house to stay, a good career that makes us secure, and a good savings? In verse 14. Then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. When we forget all that God has done, our heart becomes proud. When we forget where we came from, our heart becomes proud. When we forget that all that you and I have is blessing from God, our heart becomes proud. And not only that, when we forget the past, it says, don't forget the land of slavery, telling the Israelites. We too were slaves. We were slaves to sin. We were slaves to our bad habits. We were slaves to our old life. And it was God who forgave us. It was God who set us free through the blood of Jesus. It is God who paid the price to set us free from slave to sin. We got to make sure that we never forget where we came from. Because remembering our past helps us to be humble. Not forgetting our past, it keeps us humble. Ask yourself this morning, do I remember all the things that I struggled with in the past? What was my life like before I became a disciple? Have I forgotten that? Have I forgotten all the people who have helped me to be successful? Have I ignored God and sidelined God now that I am doing well financially with all my blessings? Let's not sideline God. And that was the danger the Israelites were warned about. Look in verse 15 onwards. And we see over here that there are 3 roles God played in the life of the Israelites that He plays in your and my life as well. In verse 15 He says, He led you. He played the role of a leader. He led the Israelites. He directed them. He walked with them. He showed them the way to that 40 years so that they will not be lost. He led through the vast and dreadful wilderness, that thirsty and waterless land with its venomous snakes and scorpions. The second role that God played in their life, He was the protector. He protected them in the wilderness. He protected them from snakes and scorpions and the enemies. And verse 16, He gave you manna to eat in the wilderness, something your ancestors had never known, to humble and to test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. The third thing was God was the provider. He provided them with water out of the rock and manna in the wilderness when nothing was growing. And that is the same 3 roles He plays in our lives today. He is the one who leads us. He is the one who protects us. He is the one who provides us. Unfortunately, sadly, we don't realize that. We don't acknowledge Him in our life as a leader, as a provider, and as a protector. In verse 17, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. This is a lie that we all believe in. We start believing in. And why is this a lie? And why is this such an important point over here? Is, when we believe that it is my power, it is my strength, and because of me, the land has produced this wealth, we start focusing on ourselves. It is, I achieved it. It is because of my hard work. It is because of my talent. And that makes us think that, I don't need God. I am God. We might not say that, but we might believe that. And that's a lie that Satan wants you and I to believe, that we don't need God. If he can make us believe that, then he has won the battle. Okay? Verse 18. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your ancestors as it is today. Now, whether you believe it or not, what God is making it very clear is, it is I, that is God, who gives us the ability to produce wealth. It is God who gives you the ability to be successful. It is God who has made you and me where we are today. So, let us not forget what God has done. That was the problem with the Israelites. It was so easy for them to forget all that God had done in their lives. When we forget God, what we noticed over here is in verse 11, we fail to observe His command. In verse 14, we become proud and self-reliant. In verse 14, the second part, we forget that we too are slave to sin. Verse 15, we forget that it is God who rescues us, who protects us, who provides us, who leads us on the journey in this life. Now, what happens if we forget God? Our action has consequences. If we choose to obey God, it has good consequences. But if we choose to ignore God or reject God and reject His word and reject His command, then there is consequences too. And in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 19 and 20, we see the consequences for rejecting God. Let's read in verse 19 and 20. If you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship and bow down to them, I testify against you today that you will be surely destroyed. Like the nations, the Lord destroyed before you. So you will be destroyed for not obeying the Lord your God. When life is going well, we can fall into the trap of thinking that it is all my effort, my talent, my gift that brought us over here. And of course, sometimes it does play a part, a small part, not a big part, in achieving things. But the fact is, actually I am not in control of my life. And what is God reminding over here? That if we ever forget God and follow other gods, and we might not follow other gods, but idolatry is when we put anything ahead of God is an idolatry. And so we might not follow other gods and bow down to them, but we might consider ourselves as God. Our achievements, we might be proud about that. We might worship our achievement, worship our gifts, worship our talent, worship the things that we have accumulated. That can become our God. So the big question today is, do I thank God for all the blessings in my life, my achievements and success, or do I take credit for it? Does this make me follow His teachings more and rely on Him more, or do I feel like I don't need God in my life? I am in control. And if you think that you are in control, you are under the same delusion as the rich fool that I am in control. Let's look further. What is the second delusion this rich fool had in Luke chapter 12, verse 17 and 18? He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. The second delusion that this rich fool had was he thought that I can secure my future. The second reason why this rich fool was because he thought that he had the power to control his future. He believed that by building a bigger barn, he could store up his surplus crops and continue to enjoy his wealth till his old age. Now, I'm not saying that it is wrong to plan for the future. We need to plan for the future. We need to plan whatever insurance to take care of our family, the medical insurance, the retirement fund. All those things are good, provided it has its own importance. When is it wrong? It is wrong when you are so consumed with securing your future that you ignore God. You ignore God's teaching. You ignore His laws and decrees. That's when it is wrong. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a brother who struggled to tithe. And I was talking to him, and I was trying to help him to see his finances. Where is he wasting his money, or is he spending? Because he was earning well and still he was struggling to tithe. And as I was looking to his expenses, more than half his salary he was saving in insurance and retirement fund. And the remaining half of the salary, he did not have enough money for all his important expenses and to tithe on it. And he was just a 25-year-old man, 25-year-old brother, but he was building the future. He was trying to secure the future without giving to God what belongs to God. And so many times, we can have this delusion that I need to secure my own future. I can secure my own future. And in doing that, we can stray away from God's commands and God's laws. So, do you struggle with the second delusion? Do you believe in the second delusion, like the rich fool, that you can secure your future? Let's look at the third delusion this man had. Verse 19. And I will say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. The third delusion was, I will enjoy my wealth. The first delusion was, I am in control of my future. Okay, I am in control. The second delusion was, I can secure my future. And now the third delusion this man had was, I will enjoy my wealth. Now this rich man had two false premises. Okay, and what are the two false premises? Number one was, he thought that he had a long life to live. And the second premise was that his wealth will make him happy and bring satisfaction and fulfillment. Don't we also struggle with the same false premise that I have a long life and the wealth will make me happy? The rich fool was foolish to think that his wealth was everything. He thought that as long as he has a long life to live, he can enjoy his wealth. And we also have bought foolishly into the lie of a culture where we believe that money can buy happiness, status, fame, and bring us satisfaction. But if we notice around us, we see a sad fact that all around us, people are becoming more and more anxious, more and more fearful, more and more worried, more and more stressful. And what do? They can't handle the challenges of this life, and they take the easy way out by committing suicide. A lot of young people, even in the newspaper lately, have been committing suicide. And these are not poor people. I'm talking about who have challenges to survive and who are committing. I'm talking about people who are successful actors recently who have committed suicide. People who are wealthy who have committed suicide. We have TikTok stars who have committed suicide. In the beginning of this year, as a family, we did not have a good start for the family. In fact, the ending of the last year, on 25th of December, Joyce's nephew, a 30-year-old nephew, a successful guy. He was a marine engineer, had a good job. He was traveling around the world. He had wealth. He had secured his life at the age of 30. Already had a beautiful home in Bangalore. Life was great. And yet on 25th December, early in the morning, Joyce's nephew committed suicide. And this really broke Joyce's heart. She was in total, she broke down, because this was the same boy when he was born. Joyce brought him to church when she first came to church. First visited the church in Delhi. She carried this small little baby to church. And at the age of 30, when we heard that he committed suicide, it just broke us all down. He had everything going great. He had wealth. He had career. He was successful in the eyes of the world. But there was still something missing for him to take that step. But that was not enough. A few days ago, one of Joyce's close friends that she grew up in Manipur, her husband committed suicide, leaving behind a wife and 2 teenage boys. If wealth is supposed to make us happy, if wealth is supposed to bring fulfillment, why are so many wealthy people committing suicide? Because there is something missing. There is something that wealth cannot give us. There is something that wealth can't meet our needs. Let us see what is that something. Let's see what Jesus has to say. What is the solution in Luke chapter 12, verse 20. But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Jesus quickly tells, "You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?" Even though we know that one day we all have to die, no one expects for us to die early. No one is thinking that, today is my last day. Now imagine if today was your last day. How would you spend your last day? Would you waste your last day? Or would you make the best use of your last day? Would you be spending more time accumulating more wealth? Or would you be doing what is most important? Jesus reminds us that death changes everything. And knowing that we will die should help us to rethink our priorities, should help us to get our priorities right. Rather than spending time investing in bigger barns for ourselves, Jesus is reminding us to invest in our relationship with God that will last. In fact, in verse 21, he says that yes, a person is fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have rich relationship with God. So brothers and sisters, the harsh reality is everything will pass. This too will pass. When you die, what will happen to all your plans? your possessions, your wealth, your dreams. What will happen to them? We need to get our priorities right, because we have a short time on this earth. Everything will pass. This too will pass. And if you're having a good time on this earth, enjoy while it lasts, because that too will pass. And if you're having a hard time, if you're having a bad time, if you're having a difficult time, then I want to encourage you also that this too will pass. Your difficult time will also pass. Nothing is permanent on this earth. The good time will pass, the bad time will pass. That's the harsh reality. So, what's the solution? Let's look in verse 21 of Luke chapter 12 for the solution that Jesus gives us. This is how it will be for whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. What does it mean to be rich towards God? What does God consider as rich? Imagine, you are traveling to a foreign country, but you're carrying Indian rupees, and you're trying to buy something in a foreign country with the Indian currency. That country will reject that currency because they want their own currency. They consider the other currencies not valuable. And so you have to convert your Indian rupees to the currency of that country before you can make any purchases. In the same way, in God's kingdom, the things of this world is considered as rubbish. And in this world, the thing that God considers valuable is considered as rubbish. For example, in God's kingdom, gold, silver, wealth, possession is useless. It has no value. For God, it is, unfortunately, it has no value. All the gold, the silver, your education, your materialistic thing has no value. But all the things that God considers, the world considers it useless. Let's look at what it says. As Jesus says, one's life does not consist in abundance of possessions. In Luke chapter 12 verse 15. In Luke chapter 12 verse 21 it says, so it is with those who store up treasure for themselves, but is not rich towards God. So what Jesus is talking about is, rather than being rich in the worldly way, we need to be rich towards God. How can we be rich towards God? Let's look at what Jesus had to say in Matthew chapter 6 verse 33. But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. According to Jesus, when we seek first His kingdom, when we seek a relationship with God, when we give importance to God and His command, when we give importance to righteousness and holiness, then that is being rich towards God. So, is seeking God and His kingdom still first in my life? Is that still my first priority, or has that taken a back seat in my life as I seek other things in this world? In 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 11, we see what Paul tells Timothy. And this is referring to greed, it's referring to be content, it is referring to the love of money. And in verse 11 it says, but you, man of God, that is Timothy, flee from all this. And the reference is love of money or greed. Flee from money, flee from love of money, flee from greed, and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. So what God is saying? Pursue righteousness. But in today's world, righteousness has no value. If you are righteous, the world is going to take advantage of you. Pursue godliness. That concept is missing in today's world. We look around the world today. There is no godliness. There is evil everywhere. Pursue faith in God, which is looked down by the world as a sign of weakness. And yet, having faith in God is valuable in God's eyes. Pursue love. It has lost its meaning in the world today. And yet the Bible says to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves. Pursue endurance or perseverance. That is missing in the world today. Today, people are not willing to persevere. People are not willing to endure. People just want to quit at the first challenge that comes their way. Pursue gentleness. The world considers gentleness as a sign of weakness. That if you are gentle, you are a weak person. And yet, these are the qualities, which is also the fruit of the Spirit, that makes us rich towards God. So today, in conclusion, let's not be like the rich fool who believed in the lies of Satan, who was disillusioned into thinking that he was in control, that he can make his future secured, and he has a long life to enjoy his wealth. Because the harsh reality is, everything will pass. The good time will pass, the bad time will pass. Death will come unannounced and suddenly, and so many of us are not prepared to die. So, how can we be rich toward God? Don't store up things for yourself without being rich towards God. And how can we do that? By seeking first His kingdom and His righteousness. What does God consider valuable is the fruit of the Spirit. Let's keep growing in the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, compassion, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. Let us grow in this fruit of the Spirit in increasing measures. And as we grow in the increasing measure, these are the things that God considers valuable. Amen? So, in conclusion, have I been the rich fool? Absolutely. On many occasions, I have been a rich fool. I know that God is in control, but when I face challenges, when I face situations in my life, I forget that God is in control, and I start taking control of my life. I think that I can control my situation. I think I can make my future secure. I think that, all the things that I am running after will make me happy. But the sad truth is that all these things are temporary. And what is eternal is God and our relationship with God. So I hope we learned something today from the rich fool. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you. Have a great day, a great week. Amen.